most major thing that impacts me the most is that I didn't realize how much of a buffer she was for like life for me. You know, like all of the pressures of life and all of the things that hit you, it's like I had an angel who was like a real guardian angel in real life that was tangible, that I could touch, that I could call, that just the sound of her voice was like a smooth cup of hot chocolate.
There was the last normal day, the last day that things were the way they were before they weren't anymore.
We kind of all rushed out of the house and said a quick goodbye. And, little did I know that would be the last time I hugged my mom.
He yells and tells me he's getting ready to go. He said, I'm okay. Just stay here. I'll be home in a few hours. We tell him bye and he leaves. That was the last time we ever saw him.
It's like the minute that helicopter hit the air, it just hit me what I was watching, because I knew he wasn't coming home and he knew he wasn't coming home.
For me, I took it more personally because I'm a nurse practitioner and why can't I save him? I can help all these other people, and why can't I save him?
Telling us that it was time, we needed to make a decision, we need to go ahead and just take him off the ventilator. And I was like, how do we know?
One thing I like to tell people is that if you lose somebody to COVID, your need to talk about the person you lost will outlast other people's desire to hear about it.
We make sure that our family members and loved ones' memories lived on. That's really important to me, is that people don't forget. I don't want to forget any of it.
So talk about them. Talk about them till people are sick of hearing about them, because as long as you're still talking about them, they're never far away.
And the last thing that my mom said is, she said, when you get to heaven, we will look for each other.
Hello everyone, you're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or go to the website forthosewelostpodcast.com and click on the contact button, and you can reach me that way as well. Also, if you'd like to help support the show, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. That link is in the show notes. All right, let's get started with this episode. Today I'll be talking to Naj in San Francisco. Naj lost her grandmother, Rosemary Williams, on July 29th, 2020. Rosemary was one of about 13 brothers and sisters, and she was the last living sibling. She and her husband moved from Louisiana to San Francisco and started their married life together. They bought a house and lived in the same community for well over 50 years. Rosemary was the center of Naj's family circle, and losing her left a hole, not only in Naj's family, but in her community too. For context, we recorded this episode on August 12th, 2022. And the day before, August 11th, was Naj's grandmother's birthday. She would have been 101 years old. Naj talks about some local San Francisco nonprofits. They are Transformational Miracles and Stand in Peace. The links to those can be found in the show notes. And with that, I'd like to welcome Naj to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, and today we are talking about your grandma.
Yes.
And you live in San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay. And what I love about today and scheduling this for today is that yesterday was your grandma's birthday.
Yes, yesterday she would have been 101 years old.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's amazing.
Yes.
And she passed away in July of 2020.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So where I normally start is in March of 2020. And I think we'll do that this time because your grandma passed away early in the pandemic. And there's so much that happened then with the lockdowns and everything that was going on. So why don't you just start and tell me where you and your grandma were in March of 2020, how you heard about COVID, the changes that you had to make in your daily life, and what happened?
Well, I remember hearing about COVID the first time. Me and my grandmother were in the kitchen. We often spent the evenings in the kitchen eating dinner together, my grandmother, myself, and my older brother, who have been living together for all of our lives. So we were watching the evening news, and I remember President Trump speaking about this virus, and some people had it, but there still wasn't like an emergency order or a huge scare. There was just a lot of questions. And people were saying to stay in or wear a mask. Some people were saying uh, certain people didn't get it. There were just a lot of misinformation still out there. And then as we progressed through the month of March, I was going to work. And one day at work, we were sent home. We were sent home without knowing when we were to return. We were told to take all of our devices, our laptops, and all of the files we would need, everything, and we would be notified. And the day that I went home, we had this conversation, my grandmother and my brother, about COVID and what the impact would be. We were hearing people were dying, and we were under an emergency order, and everyone was to be in the house. And it was really scary because my grandmother is elderly at this point. She was 98, and so we were very concerned about keeping her protected. We were concerned about keeping ourselves protected. But honestly, I still was going out. I wasn't going to work, but I was going out doing grocery shopping and things of that nature, wearing a mask, washing my hands, doing everything that I was being told to do from the news media. Um, and then as months went by, my grandmother needed to have in-home support along with myself and my brother. And so we tried to do this within the home, within the family, because she had needed to get a hip replacement throughout these months. She was experiencing some mobility issues. So we had an in-home care provider that has started around May or June. And that is where my grandmother contracted the coronavirus from a healthcare provider who came into the home, and she got COVID.
Oh. So well, I guess my first question is, did they have any kind of testing or anything that they were doing at the time, any kind of even checks on whether or not someone was feeling ill before she would come into your house, or the care person would come into your house?
Yes, we were, of course, doing the temperature check and asking the normal questions that you ask. Do you have any symptoms? Have you felt sick? Are you coughing? We were even inquiring about being around other people, because I believe at that time we were mandated to be in your home and with the people whom you lived with, and anyone else outside of that would be considered risk. Um, and so we did that. But again, later on, finding out that the caregiver had an event at their home because they had a birthday uh,
Oh,
was very disheartening. And yeah, it's still very fresh for me because of how close me and my grandmother were. Like I mentioned in the beginning, my grandmother raised me. I'm 43 years old, so I've been with my grandmother since the late 70s, and I I've always known that the day would come, but you can never prepare. You never feel like you've had enough time. And the people that you love the most, you always want them to live forever. There's always this fantasy in the back of your mind that if they can't live forever, at least God, creator, universe, let me outlive them, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that a quote from, I want to say Winnie the Pooh or something like that? Like, if you live 100 years, let me live one day less than 100 years so I never have to live without you.
Yes.
Oh,
Man.
yeah. Yeah. We never have them for long enough, no matter how long we have them.
Right.
So you were doing the checking with this caregiver. See, I guess I know I've talked a little bit about what happened with me, but my mom was in a memory care, and I felt very similar to how you just described, which is I was in my bubble. I was staying with a certain small number of people and then visiting my mom at the window. But I watched the workers go in and out of there, and I was always thinking to myself, what are they doing? What's their family doing? Where do their spouses work and what are their kids doing? And are they being as careful as I'm being with my mom?
Right.
Yeah. And so this is, how your grandma got COVID. Did you and your brother end up getting COVID?
No, which
Oh,
was, can you imagine? Like, I often think back on that, on when I found out, because we didn't immediately, well, we immediately found out when she went into the hospital. So what happened was she must have had it for a few days. I started on one night, she was sick from eating. She had an upset stomach. And I was like, wow, this is really weird because this is the norm, like regular food she always eats. My first thought was maybe something's wrong with the food. Maybe I left it out too long. Maybe it was spoiled. So in the morning, she was still feeling sick and she was weak. And I was like, oh, wow. And she had a fall. And so the fall is what prompted the family to take her to the hospital. And that is how we discovered that she was positive with COVID. And so immediately, everyone that had been participating in caregiving got tested, which is myself, my brother, her son, and her daughter, my aunt and uncle. None of us had a positive test.
wow.
And I just remember wishing that I was positive. Like I remember really wishing that. I know it seems crazy now. I want to live today. I wanted to live that day, but it's half of me just wanted to be able to be with her because it was just, the protocol. You can't be there with a person, and we're a very faith-based family, and I believe that just being in her presence and being able to pray with her and speak with her and touch her could have given her an extra strength, an extra push, an extra breath. So I went through all of that stage of the grieving process.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened once she was taken to the hospital?
Immediately they were, at that time, anyone going into the hospital, because at this point we're 4 or 5 months in, people are dying at rapid rates. So anytime you're going to the hospital, that's the first thing that they want to check. And so we immediately knew that she was positive. Immediately, my aunt and uncle who took her to the hospital couldn't go past the waiting room, and we couldn't visit her. We had to hear all of the information from the nurse. And the first 3 days were very scary, but they were good. And we were talking on the phone to her. She sounded normal. She had a little cough, but she still sounded vibrant and normal. The whole entire process of her hospitalization was 9 days. On the fourth or fifth, probably the fifth day, it took a very rapid downward spiral. Her breathing, um, her breathing, the fever, all of the symptoms, going on a respirator, and then and the final stages, because the doctors were, not knowing it was touch and go. She's 98 years old. Everyone is really scared that this is the end. And so they were allowing us to do the FaceTime video calls to speak with her. And then on the last day that she was here with us, we were all on a video call with her because the doctor called us saying that through the night she was begging that they call her family so that she could ask to be let go, that it was too much pain for her and that she could no longer endure. And she just wanted us to let her go. And so we all were on a FaceTime call and she spoke with us. I was actually the first person to be able to speak with her. I'm really grateful for that opportunity to spend the first 5 minutes on the phone with her alone and to give her exactly what she needed and wanted in that moment, freeing her from any kind of apprehension or fear of how the family would be without her, even though I absolutely didn't feel anything that I said. I told her that I would be okay, that we would all be okay, that I understood, and that I just wanted her to be at peace and that I loved her and that, that she deserved to be at peace. And then we all got on, I like let everyone else in on the call. I let everyone else in on the call. And then, like, about 15 minutes into the call, we watched her take her last breath. It was like we could hear it. We were talking, and then you just hear this. And I was like, was that it? And then the nurse came over and confirmed that what we heard was it. We stayed on the line. We watched them unhook all of the machines. And I quickly made my way to the hospital so that I could go in the room and be there in the final moments to touch her, to wipe her face, to just whisper in her ear. So I'm grateful to the opportunity of the way that things were set up, that you could do that in the last moments. And it was a really long and quick, if that makes any sense, 9 days.
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense because you are thinking about it. It's always on your mind. It feels like an unending amount of time in between FaceTime, video calls, hearing from the nurse or anything. But then, oh yeah, when it changes and it changes so fast.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So your grandma was on a ventilator or not? She was.
Yes, she was.
And did they take her off that at the end so that you could talk to her?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was like she went into a place where they needed to put her on a ventilator. She was in one of those special rooms. And then she was getting better. She was showing better signs. She was stabilizing. And so they had moved her into a room where she was just getting oxygen, like the mask oxygen. And so that was where she was. And I believe they had given her, at that time, they were trying the like some type of blood mixture, which was supposed to kind of help.
Yeah, the convalescent plasma. Yeah.
And so they had tried that and it didn't work. And so I think I'm not really sure that they actually went back into the full respirator. And at that point, I believe she was just really tired and in a lot of pain.
Yeah. I guess one of my questions I'm thinking right now is when she came off the ventilator and she was moved, did you have this incredible feeling of hope? Like it was
Yes.
all going
Yes.
to be okay? And then,
And then, yeah, I mean, she had just gotten through a hip replacement. She had just gotten through a heart, a pacemaker, like all of these things in the later years. And she came through with flying colors. I didn't understand the severity of COVID-19 and how far away we were from what is now seeming to be like the common flu. I feel so cheated. I mean, there's so many different emotions around it. I'm grateful to be away from the space that we were in as a country, as a nation in 2020. But I just wish that with all of the technology and everything and all of the ways that we're supposed to be advanced, that someone could have helped my grandmother.
yeah. Yeah, that if she hadn't gotten COVID in the summer of 2020 and say had it 3 months ago, you know,
Right.
yeah.
She could have gotten the pill
Hmm.
that Biden got.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever talk to the caregiver after your grandma passed away?
Yes. And so that's a very different situation because the caregiver was one that was through the family. So I did speak with her. I don't have a relationship with her anymore to this day because I'm still working through those emotions.
Mhm.
Um, it was not a good conversation. I, you know, I know that I don't know what she was thinking. I, I'm still working through those emotions. She apologized, but what can I do? And I don't know. I don't I don't know.
Yeah.
My grandmother liked her though. She was my grandmother's favorite caregiver.
Oh, well.
She was my grandmother's favorite caregiver.
Yeah. I don't know if that gives you any comfort at all or if you're just still upset
It,
about it. I don't know.
I'm getting through it. I'm working through it. I'm trying, but I'm comforted in knowing that my grandmother liked her. And so she probably will want me to not hold a grudge or not sit in anger.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Have you had a funeral or a memorial service for your grandma?
Yes, we had a funeral immediately. We did not wait. We had a funeral. I've never had a funeral like this before in my life. But because my grandmother was a mother of the church and she had so many people that wanted to acknowledge her, but just for ourselves as well, we had a funeral at a funeral home versus a usual, we would have had it in her church home. We had two funerals, one at 11 and one at 1 p.m. because there was a limit at that time of people who could be in a building. We were able to have it inside. There was a covering over the casket was open, but there was a covering over. There was a lot of protocols that we had to go through as far as the waiting period, even though um, she was deceased, the body was still considered COVID positive.
Mhm.
And so there were a lot of there was like wait times that the funeral home had to do before they can actually like take care of her and get her prepared. Um, and then, yeah, and then the plastic over the, the actual casket. The funeral home is actually a very long member, a long friend of the family. So I was able to assist in preparing her hair with the hairstylist, which was a special moment. Uh, but the funeral services themselves were very different because we had to adapt to the COVID protocols and precautions. A lot of family members that she had maybe that would have been able to come weren't able to make it. She grew up, well, she's originally from Louisiana. So she had 13, there was a family of 13 siblings. She had 12 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you could imagine all of the nieces and nephews. She was the last surviving sibling. Her younger brother and her had been together for 97, 96 years. No, 97. He was a year behind her. 97 years. He had passed a couple of months before COVID even came into our purview. So around December of the year before. But she was the last of 13. A lot of family wasn't able to come because of the fact that we had a limit if they did make it. And so the traveling didn't seem like the best thing to do at that time, especially given the fact that they would have to isolate and do all of these things because, there were still COVID precautions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So she was the matriarch
Mhm.
of your family.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
It's very different now.
Yeah.
It is so very.
I don't really come from a big family, so I can't relate in that way, but I can I can imagine how different it is now without her because it seems like she was well, at least from what you're describing, the center and everybody gathered around her.
Yes. And if I don't the most major thing that impacts me the most is that I didn't realize how much of a buffer she was for life for me. All of the pressures of life and all of the things that hit you, it's like I had an angel who was like a real guardian angel in real life that was tangible, that I could touch, that I could call, that just the sound of her voice was like a smooth cup of hot chocolate, on any situation.
Yeah.
Even in my older years, I would really just call my grandmother. I remember just probably weeks before she had gotten sick, calling her and just crying about something. And, it just was like her ability to say, Naj, it's okay. Come on home. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh. I hope to offer that to someone else in my family. I hope to carry that on, to be that for someone. I don't know who, but I just hope that someone throughout my life, I'm able to become that because it's such a wonderful feeling and a wonderful opportunity. It's something everyone should experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And she would probably want that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I ask people is how you it's been 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that first year, a lot of people you go through those firsts, the first birthday, first Christmas, first Thanksgiving. And then, people say time heals and the first year so hard. My experience is the second year is harder than the first year. But how did you cope with that? Did you go through periods where you relived the things that happened the year before, and how are you coping with that?
Yes, we tried the first year, the very first holiday immediately following, aside from birthdays, there are a couple of birthdays. It's like my grandmother and then myself and then my brother were like August, September, October. And so the birthdays were the first and they were really hard. So we tried to do something different to take our minds off of her not being there. But because we lived in the home with her, our cousins called us on our birthdays and tried to sing the song that grandmother would sing, you know? And it was like, I don't know that they didn't know because I didn't tell them, but that it probably would have been easier if they wouldn't have, you know? It's just, yeah. And then Thanksgiving and Christmas, we tried to emulate the year before. Um, we did the best we could, and it was actually very comforting. Uh, as the year has progressed and this year around, it's been different. It's been very isolated. The family is fragmented. There is no desire to try to be together, which is the normal when grandma's around, which is different. And then yesterday being her birthday, actually on last year, I went to the gravesite and I actually did something, specific that was in commemoration for her birthday. But this year, I just decided to be quiet and at home. I woke up yesterday and I shed a few tears because I felt the loneliness, and I was really excited about this interview. And this is my way of memorializing on the second year. And I do agree with you in saying that it's harder because it's deeper. It's more real, and I have to do more work.
Yeah. And what does that look like work? Is it some kind of grief share? Is it support groups for COVID loss? Is it something else in your community or I guess therapy?
It looks like a mixture of all of those things. And so this interview is a part of how I am proactively looking for avenues and ways that are comfortable to me, where I can process, where I can still acknowledge the whole entire process, not just the fact that I miss her and there is grief there, but in acknowledging all parts and areas of how I got to the grief. And so I haven't just nailed it down to one particular way. I'm very interested in therapy. Haven't found a therapist. Haven't really actively looked. I have a couple of times, but that's a whole nother discussion. But I'm definitely utilizing people. I'm very active in my community, especially with this organization, which my brother established. Is called Transformational Miracles, working with people in transforming different life changes, and grief being one of those. And then also in connection with another organization, which is called Stand in Peace, which is ran by a very good, she's family, and both people being family and knowing my situation offer and create spaces where grief is a topic, or we've had educational series about grief. We've had therapists come in and talk to us and have shared in circles. We've created healing days where we've brought community together to just have a place where people who've experienced any type of loss in the last year or throughout the pandemic could come and share. And so I'm always taking advantage just to keep it present. And I think talking about it in any space, because everything that you mentioned, whether it's therapy or a circle, a group specifically focused on grief, it's all about being open and having a place that you feel safe enough to share. And so I'm just being aware of those spaces and not passing up opportunities to open my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like people, especially with regards to a COVID death, don't want to hear it?
I haven't really gotten the feeling that people don't want to hear it, but definitely people don't want to talk about it. Like there's a stigma around, or in the beginning, there was a stigma around if you passed away from COVID, it was like this disease you didn't want to get or have. I recall my family not wanting us to put anything on social media about how my grandmother passed away. They wanted everyone to believe that because she was 98 and it was just old age. And I was like, no, we need to be honest because we need to let people know that it's real. Because for us to be in a African American community, we had a lot of myths that needed to be dispelled. And I mean, just an opportunity just to be honest, to be authentic. You never know who you can help. And so that was the side that I experienced as far as any type of shame, but not feeling like people didn't want to hear about it because it was COVID.
Yeah.
There's actually been a lot of empathy and sympathy around it, at least in my area.
That's good. If you don't tell people and you keep that fact to yourself because you don't feel comfortable sharing it, or your family, someone in your family didn't want to share it, then it's something that you have to keep and don't talk about. And then it's sort of, I feel like that would change, like over time, change the feeling of the loss by having to hold some of it back.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So, one of the things I want to ask you, and I know that we had talked about this when we spoke on the phone, is your feeling that your grandma sort of was gently prodding you into getting ready for her passing.
Yes. And it's amazing to me because I don't think that she had any inkling or idea that COVID was coming or that she was going to contract it. I mean, we would actually, and it's so sad, we would joke about it like, Corona's gonna get you and they gonna get me, just little jokes. But before, yes, probably, I know at least months before, she was asking me to do certain things. She was asking me to get a bank account. She wanted to give me some cash that she had on hand that she wanted me to put into a bank. She was asking me about heirlooms of hers that I might want. She would, come in my room and drop things off on my bed and say, I want you to keep this. And I was just so out of it, living in the fantasy, the Winnie the Pooh. I was just like, oh, she's just spring cleaning, grandma's just tired of all this junk. Like, she just wants to clean her space. I mean, she had me packing boxes. She sent clothes off to a cousin in New York. Like, oh yeah, she's always wanted this suit and this hat. I'm just gonna send it to her. It's too big for me. I'm not wearing it. She had really become a minimalist. She was living very minimal. And the only thing that really, really was like striking me as different in her behavior was her eating habits. And I was like, wow, she doesn't really eat that much anymore. But I was thinking, okay, maybe it's just, she's had a couple of health issues with the pacemaker and she's got to change her diet. So maybe she doesn't like, the food because she can't season it the way that she's used to.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back and just, in hindsight, I really believe that she felt it in her spirit. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, she's had some sort of a sense of that her time was shorter than you wanted it to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, she even knew, this is like, so my grandmother knew that she was going to be losing her mobility before she lost it. She was she would cook all of the meals. My grandmother probably cooked until the age of 96, 97, 96. I'll say 96. And
Wow.
around 95, she started saying, like I'm not gonna be standing over this stove much longer. You better figure out what I'm doing. You better watch me. And I just be like, yeah, whatever. I'm not, I would just push you over to the stove. You can do it. And she's like, no, I'm serious. I am not. And then, not even just thinking back and then watching how it progressed. And it was just like she had a fall. And then she had another fall. And the last fall was when she broke her hip, and it was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And then so I really, really honestly believe that I know she had like a special gift and intuition, a mother's love, a grandmother's intuition, a women's intuition, a connection with God, whatever you want to call it, all throughout my life, because she always knew everything that I was doing that I wasn't supposed to. But just like definitely knew that, like you said, it was going to be a shorter time than I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still live in the home that she had?
We just had to move out in the beginning of the summer, in May of this year. My aunt and uncle decided, against my grandmother's wishes, of course, to sell the home because it's in a very lucrative part of San Francisco. They're looking to become millionaires for the first time in their life. And so we had to move out. No, they weren't living there. We were the only ones occupying with my grandmother. We went through court. And so we've been out for a couple of months now.
Mm. Is that difficult? Like with your family to have that kind of thing happen?
Yes, it was very hard. Um, I'm surprised that we still talk. It's very weird. Like I do a part-time job for this police union, and my aunt is a police officer. She just retired 2 weeks ago. And I've been working with this union through her recommendation for the last 7 years. And so regardless to whatever we were going through personally, we still had to maintain a professional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the only thing that has allowed us still a small window of communication, because the court proceedings were very hard. It wasn't like regular court, like what you see on TV. Probate court is more or less documentation, but reading the statements that people say about each other back and forth are hurtful, just as hurtful as if someone sits in your face and says it.
Mm.
And then just knowing that the Christmas before my grandmother passed away, the last Christmas that she had alive, she made the entire family sign a document stating that the house would not be sold, that me and my brother would be still allowed to live there. There was a downstairs apartment that she had remodeled that she wanted us to occupy and still be able to use the upstairs house for income that could support the home and everyone else that didn't live in the home so there was a plan, and it was just like they didn't stick to the plan. And I think the plan was, it was to carry on the dream. Like the home that we lived in, my grandmother and grandfather came here from Louisiana with the migration, and were able to purchase this home. It was a 1-bedroom home that had experienced a fire. They purchased it, I believe, in the late 30s or early 40s. Actually, they probably had the home for 78 years, because 76 years, my mom would have been 77. She was 1 year old when they bought it. And my grandfather built it out to a 4-bedroom, 1-bathroom, total 6 rooms upstairs, an in-law apartment downstairs with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, a huge backyard with a like bombshell shed, I like to call it, because the older days was made of concrete. And it's just like, I couldn't believe it after all that had went into it, all of the memories. Like my grandfather had carved his initials in the concrete because he was a cement mason in the backyard. And like my uncle would tell us stories. My uncle he still lives next door to the house because he wanted to live next door to his parents. but he talks about, how they installed the stairs, how they did the roof, and how we laid the driveway. And it was like to see all of that let go. And it's just like, it's so ironic. Here's what I deal with now. So I've been in that neighborhood all my life. I still go to that neighborhood because I'm still community active and I'm not that far away in the apartment that I found. And so I get people from the neighborhood who live blocks away who come up to me and say, it's extremely hard for me to go up and down your street without knowing that you and your grandma are still there.
Yeah.
So it's like, it doesn't just affect me. It's like people I would have never even thought, like I didn't even think you cared. Like, he's like, it's not the same. I don't like seeing that for sale sign out there. Like, it hurts. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking more and more how she really was the center of a circle of a lot of people who gathered around her.
Yeah.
And probably your grandfather too, from the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. he was a minister. So yeah, he had some very strong stakes down in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you participated in any of the COVID memorials, set your grandma's name in or anything like that?
Yes.
Which ones?
There was one at City Hall here in San Francisco. There have been some community ones. There was one in Bayview Hunters Point that I participated in. Someone videotaped me. I like shared a little bit about my grandmother and just what she meant to me. And it was actually a balloon release. At the end, we were able to release balloons. And then again, at a healing circle that was for people who lost loved ones to COVID, and was able to share how I felt, and how I was dealing with it and what kind of support I was looking for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few questions left. One of the things that I wrote down that I wanted to ask you is what do you, I guess, miss the most about your grandma, and then take from her example to you into your world?
I miss the most her ability to soothe me. Yeah, I just miss that the most. Things seem so intense and so fast paced and demanding now that she's not here. Oh, my goodness, it's like I'm full on adult mode all the time. And what I want to take with me and continue to take with me is just her faith and her connection to her higher power. I just want to be able to have that, it's just like and I know that I hope God isn't that jealous, but I'm like, it's just the next best thing to not having my grandmother. Like, I'm sorry, God, I know this would be like the opposite way around. I would just take the relationship, her ability, her faith, her ability to withstand and to stay steadfast and unmovable no matter what obstacles came. She did it with class and humility. And I am so needing to learn that because I'm coming from a place of fast-paced anger, short-tempered, impatient. And that is nothing like her. And I'm just trying to apply those characteristics in my life.
Yeah. So one of the last questions I ask people is, what do you say to people who tell you that COVID isn't real?
COVID is real to me. It took really a real piece of my life away. It is not a joke. We have come a long way. We have come a long way, but I still do not take it lightly. I am vaccinated, I am boosted, and I am looking for a vaccine for monkeypox. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I don't know if we're under biological warfare. I don't know what's happening, but I know that when we do have a warning and there are things made available to us and we are getting information, we're getting directives to protect ourselves, that I will take it seriously.
Yeah. And how are things in San Francisco? I live in Oregon. You live in California. Our states, most of the West Coast, in fact, was under some of the most strict and longest lasting lockdowns. How do you feel about life in San Francisco right now, over 2 years after the pandemic started?
COVID surges are still on my radar. I still want to know what the latest strand is and what the symptoms are. Is it worse than the last? How is it impacting us, vaccinated or not? It's still something I'm very scared of. I have contracted it since, but this was in between my vaccinations and I did not like it. I'm grateful to the heavens above that I'm still alive and I did, and that we were advanced in medicines and things of that nature. But it just, in San Francisco, we're under emergency order for monkeypox. We haven't had any lockdowns or any shutdowns. But again, in the beginning, there was the misinformation or the misbelief that there was a certain particular group of people that were only getting it. And I just wanted to always do more research to find out and of course, dispel, which I knew was a myth anyways. And then I'm not living in fear, but I'm living vigilantly with my eyes open to health. And that's something new to me. Like
Yeah.
I'm in my 40s and I'm just living, now, last year, probably just living like I'm in my 40s. I've been living like I'm in my 20s, like doing whatever. Come on. Like, yeah, not anymore.
Yeah. Isn't 40 the new 20?
I'm saying, I'm like, you guys are cheating me out of the new 20. Why does all this have to happen now?
Yeah.
Every time I go to a music festival, I'm scared to death. They're like, yeah, it's gonna be 250,000 people. Where? I'm not going.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. What was your grandma's name?
Rosemary Williams.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to say their names out loud.
Yes.
And I hope that as the first day of this year after your grandma's, what would have been her 101st birthday, that this feels a healing to you.
Yes, it does. I'm sitting here and I did a little ritual before we started, and I'm spiritual. I believe in God and I believe in Jesus. I believe in the universe. I believe in cosmic fields and bodies, and I really, really believe in energy. So I'm sitting here with my two crystals in my hand, and they are, healing crystals because I knew that this would be an opportunity for me to experience healing. And I'm just so appreciative of you, Jennifer, for allowing me, for reaching back to me when I reached out to you without knowing, for taking your time, just for doing this. I mean, I wish I could hug you.
Oh, I wish I could hug you too.
Oh.
I'm really glad. I usually take a few minutes before I start, like I get on Zoom and start recording and center myself too, because it's important. It's important to me that the people who tell their stories, like you talking about your grandma, get to tell what you want, get to say it how you want to say it, and bring them to everybody else in a way that feels healing and good for you. And I want to be honoring of that. And so I always take a minute and center myself so that I can be fully present for this experience, because every single time I cry, but I also, when I'm done here and you're done here, I'm going to think about this for, days. And then I will come back and edit this, and it'll just be all fresh in my mind again. And it's a beautiful thing how it's a beautiful thing to just talk about them.
It really is.
Yeah. Thank you, Naj. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the show notes below. And if you're still listening, and thank you so much if you are, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.